Take DJ and PK wherever you go.
Find every moment of every show in podcast form by searching DJ and PK on your favorite platform.
This is DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Join Hans and Scotty Monday from noon to 3 as they broadcast live from Minky Couture in Layton. Make Mother's Day easy and get the best gift ever, a blanket from Minky Couture. Mom will love it. Shop online at minkycouture.com or at any Minky store. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, The Zone. The question of the morning. With Keba Keita in the transfer portal, what is next for him and where does Utah basketball go from here? It's funny, yesterday's question took on a whole new life and got a whole new reaction. We didn't put it up because of Keba. That news, hadn't broken yet. But it was about Utah basketball. What's going on with Utah basketball? Now, that got about 30 responses because it went up because Chris Burgess left Utah and took the BYU job. And so with Utah, with Davon in the portal, Burgess leaving, he was the second assistant to leave. So that led to the question, what's going on with Utah basketball? But then within 24 hours, Keba Keita goes into the portal, and usually these things have a shelf life of like 5 to 10 hours. Honestly, they don't even make it halfway through a day before they get buried by all the other stuff people are putting out on Twitter. But this one got a whole second life and got a whole slew of answers because the Keba Keita news broke, and it just furthers the question. All right, that's 2 assistant coaches. That's 2 key players, or is it 3 now, actually, into the portal.
We've lost count.
That's what's happened, right? I mean, it's just clearly, after a while, the numbers don't matter. It's just clearly a season of upheaval and major change for the Utah program. Now, the good news is Craig Smith's got to stay in there and just keep swinging. I mean, nobody's throwing in the towel, right? That's a GIF I need to use, Christian. Did you go in and check all the GIFs? I was responding to some of these.
Yeah. The Titanic one was really, really good.
You like the Titanic one? That made you laugh? The GIFs are there. It's funny, like, I found that when you type a response in words, people take it the worst way possible and provide the angriest response possible. And if you put a GIF in there, people take it the best way possible and have the most hilarious response possible. It's interesting how whether you use a picture or words seems to really change the way people respond. Even if you're saying the same thing and it's just how you express yourself, it seems to elicit a really different set of emotions out of people. I can't explain it, but I've just noticed that trend over time. So you like that better than Ben Affleck leaning in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm scrolling through them right now, and that one, that's a good one too. I think the 84 years. Stand by Me. Somebody replied from the Stand by Me.
The Stand by Me was hilarious.
That was funny.
What's going on? What's going on with Utah basketball? And this was harsh. I will say, I thought this was harsh, but it was hilarious. He's got the kid from Stand By Me. You guys want to go and see a dead body? However, I will debate that situation. As bad as things have been for Utah basketball with 2 NCAA tournament bids now in 19 years. No, excuse me, 3 in 19 years. Cheating out of 1. They had a one and done in there. 3 bids in 19 years. I mean, it's bad. I know why you'd use the Stand By Me gif, and it's hilarious. I mean, I will give you it's hilarious. But it's harsh because it's not over. You lost assistant coaches, and you've lost multiple key players now. Yeah, well, Utah State lost their head coach, all of their assistants, and all of the points, and still went in the portal and put a team together. So he's got to go out. Craig's got to go out and hire assistant coaches. Can he find assistant coaches who bring guys? PK and I were talking about this earlier this week. I don't even think this is debatable. And I shouldn't say that because now you people tweet at me and debate it. Not all of you, just those of you who are crazy and those of you who are big old pot stirrers, contrarians. It used to be a high school coach or a parent or an uncle who could deliver a really talented player could get a job as an assistant basketball coach on a college staff. And there are lots of examples. And the best is Danny Manning's dad got a job coaching because he delivered Danny Manning. And Larry Brown said, yeah, I'll put you on my staff if we can get Danny Manning. And then they went and won the NCAA championship in 1988 with Danny Manning. So what did Larry Brown do? he made an excellent decision. And you can say, it shouldn't work like that. I'm like, yeah, well, Larry's over there and he's wearing a net around his neck and he's holding a trophy. So, and he's about to get a big contract extension. So he did make a great decision. And now it's changed. Now the coach who can deliver star players can go from a low major or a mid-major to a Big 12 school. Yeah, I'll bring so-and-so. Danny Sprinkle brought 2 guys from Montana State, and they ended up hitting big shots and making big plays. And that was Utah State's best season in 50 years. Maybe it was their best season ever. They won the Mountain West Conference for the first time, and they went to and they won a tournament game for the first time in 22 years, I think, and only the second time in 50. They were an Elite Eight back in 1970. It was a different world then, so someone else can go have the best team ever debate. But that was a great season, and it came out of just a wreckage and like nothing. I mean, Utah still got the guy in charge. And my question for him going forward, I feel totally different about coaches now. Before, you had your 3 to 4 to 5 years. You need to build your program. You get your staff. You have your relationships. You build the team. And 2 things, you have to have one of 2 things. Either you got to win or you have to have a plan. If you don't win and I understand the plan, I can usually roll for another year or 2 and wait for the plan to kick in. And the more you get out front and lay out your plan and I see how on track you are, the more wiggle room I'm going to give you, the more credibility you've earned with me. Pablo Mastroeni has sat there and he talks basically 3 times a week. And he's laid out a bunch of stuff he wants. And then you see it happen in a game and it works. And you're like, okay, I'm going to trust his plan. We need to change over the roster. Why? We need more left-footed players on the left side of the field. Makes the field wider. And I saw the left center back in a game they needed to win and they weren't winning. And the left center back played it to the left back who got right on the left line. Oh, yeah, when you have a left foot, it makes the field like 10 yards wider. He was literally on the line. He played a ball 50 yards down. It was amazing. Right on the stripe. He said, I need attackers who defend. And I saw Diego Luna defend. And he bumped the guy twice. The guy was under pressure. The guy, he dove trying to draw the whistle. And the ref didn't bite. And Diego got the ball and headed for the goal. And Pablo said, we need our young guys to have confidence in themselves. If they have the shot, pull the trigger and take the shot. Don't overpass. And he specifically said about Diego Luna. And Diego Luna took the shot and he scored and they won the game. And I asked Pablo later, I remember you saying that. Were you thinking that when he was going to goal? And Pablo said, literally, totally honest, I was singing it and it hurt so bad I couldn't watch. And I turned my back. And when I turned back around, the ball was in the net and he was celebrating. I couldn't watch. It would have killed me if he'd laid that ball off. Now I trust that guy. He told me what he wanted. He got what he wanted. And it turned out they've been winning and playing a game. What's your plan? Obviously, I can't look at Craig and say you got the results. The results have slowly trended better in the right. So you get a little benefit of the doubt for that. I'd like to hear the plan. And I think the plan needs to be we need more money to compete with NIL. Guys won't transfer if they get the ball and they get the most money.
And I think the hardest part is that there's no patience for these plans to come to fruition.
Totally agree.
Anymore.
And I'm more patient than most people. And I got impatient with Larry Krystkowiak. It was 5 straight years of not going to the tournament. And the last 3 years, every year was worse than the last, and it trended into a losing. I mean, and I know he got an extra year at the end because of the pandemic. It was the wrong time to buy somebody out. They were laying people off. So I get that. Circumstances conspired, right? Eventually, I do lose patience. But I am probably more patient than most people. I've seen enough coaches turn it around. But I think he's pretty good at selling. If I were the AD there, I'd probably say you need to get out and sell for NIL. I'm surprised that college teams are still limiting access to their players and coaches. There needs to be more access. Possibly it needs to be structured because there can be so many people. But you need to get out there and sell. It's super competitive in the entertainment world. I mean, we're reading these concert things all the time because they think all our listeners are going to buy concert tickets. I mean, they're no fools. They're tracking where the stuff gets sold. They're not guessing. They know, right? And so they're competing. The entertainment, they're literally competing for you, our listeners. Go to a concert this night. Go to a Jazz game that night. Go to a Utah or a BYU or Utah State or Weber State football game. Go to a Utah-BYU basketball game. And now go to a hockey game. It's more competitive. Get out there. Earlier in the show, we played Kyle Whittingham asking for money. They literally put him on a University of Utah camera, taped it, edit it on a University of Utah system, and put it on a University of Utah website and social media and say, give to the collective. Why wouldn't they do that? Get out there. And Kyle does some media, but, man, if they need the money, I'd have them doing more. Call them, offer them up to radio stations or TV stations. Nobody, at this point, nobody has what we used to have, where everybody read the paper and everybody watched one of 3 TV stations. You could get your message out pretty quickly. And I watched Hall of Famers get their message out. They worked the media. Jerry Sloan and Lavelle Edwards. They did some things the same. They did some things very differently. But they knew what their message was, they knew what their goal was, and they knew how to sell it to the public. And
then they made sure that the public knows.
Oh, yeah. They coached their teams through the public. Both of them did. That was one of the things they had in common. I mean, it was amazing to watch them. And they knew everybody in the media. They had relationships. And coaches would tell you, I'm too busy. And we got that from Quinn Snyder on the air once. It's not a secret. You going to let me go and do my job? 3 minutes into an interview. I don't see what good that did. I don't. And it's a little different in the pro because the pros aren't out there getting the NIL money. The pros are getting a tremendous amount of TV money. And if the Jazz can sell out the arena in a way that most NBA teams can't, a few can, but the Jazz are, they're in a pretty good spot there. I get a little bit why they cut back on it, but the Jazz at the same time, I've heard right out of the mouth of Jazz executives, and this is older now. This is, before the sale. This is going back into the Miller era. But a guy said that Phoenix makes more money in the first 12 rows than we make in our whole arena. And all the money they make after row 12. Now, they've since remodeled the arena, so some of these things have changed. And they've got those 8 bunker suites generating cash. So they've done some stuff. And the whole second floor, people dine there, and they're paying top dollar to go out and sit in the 20th row after they dine on what used to be the corporate offices. So they've changed some stuff there to try and close that gap. They haven't just been standing around. But if you want to raise the ticket prices, make sure you have a waiting list. So when someone checks out, you immediately check somebody right back in. Never have enough interest. So I think what Kyle did, I know some people probably look at that and a little squeamish, and I'm not. Times have changed. That's what has to be done. And I think Craig Smith needs to do more of it. It's a little embarrassing. I know he hated the road losses, and you could see it on his face on the sideline during games. He was beaten down. But that guy's got a ton of energy. That guy can talk. And people who know him really trust, admire, and like him. So what's the plan? I think the plan needs to involve the Utes need more NIL money. That's what they need. I think BYU has just committed to NIL money in a way that they hadn't. I think they just upped their game, certainly on the basketball side. I'm not sure if it's happening on the football side. I think if it isn't, it should be happening. Maybe we just haven't seen the results of it. I think we'll know it when we see a change in quarterback. What is the plan at quarterback? They had a nice run of NFL quarterbacks, and now, they had a one-and-done guy in Slovis. And now with Bohannon, they're bringing in a one-and-done guy. How do you bring in the transfer who has 2 or 3 years left and a transfer who has fewer question marks? Well, my guess is you get more NIL money. So how do they go out and sell it? And I know some people think it's a little unseemly, and I guess it is if you want to compare it to 1995, but we're 30 years down the road, and things have changed a lot just in the last 5 years. And we had Utah State's new coach on, and we're talking about how he rebuilt at his last job. He's like, that was 7 years ago, and everything has changed in 7 years. I thought that was one of his best answers. The guy's got, okay, he had a plan, and he knows that plan can't work again now because all the rules have changed. He's coming up with a new plan. I love that answer. So I think that's what the Utes need. Now, maybe they're holding back basketball because they got to raise more money for football and they're putting all the eggs in a football basket. In which case, well, then you can't really hold Craig accountable if that's what he's being told. I don't know for sure what he's being told. I think we can surmise a few things. And of what we've seen here in the last week or two, I think once he's available to the media again, there can be more hard questions asked. What he can say publicly and what he can't. And it's always a little political. It's always dicey. You got to be careful. And Lavelle and Jerry Sloan were. But, man, they knew how to ride that line, and they knew how to sell it. And one guy's football, and one guy's basketball, and one guy's college, and one guy's pro, and one guy's in Salt Lake, and one guy's in Provo. We can line up all the differences, but when you look big picture, how they sold their programs and how they grew it and how they sold their sport, how they coached their guys through the public, there's a reason those 2 guys are Hall of Famers. They had that mastered. All right, DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Coming up next, we got stuff to learn about the NHL. Chris Bengel is going to join us, and he is going to teach us about the NHL. I got about a half dozen questions for him. We're going to know more next, right here on The Zone.
One of the coolest stations in the world.
Utah's highest rated, most listened to sports radio show for over 20 years.
Everyone's listening.
This is DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We're joined now by Chris Bengel, NHL writer for CBS Sports. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So my job as a local sportscaster in Utah for 30 years has been to cover local sports, and the NHL has not been a local sport. Am I a sports fan? Absolutely. But this time of year, I'm not watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. A, I watch Jazz playoff games if they're in it. And then B, I watch NBA playoff games next. And then C, if I'm on Twitter and I see Game 7's gone to overtime, of course I turn it on. I'm a sports fan. It's drama. It's fun. I love to watch it. But I need to know a little more about the NHL so that I know enough to be dangerous. There's my goal. Are you ready to educate me and bring me along?
Of course. First off, I think, the NHL is up there with one of the most chaotic postseasons that there can be.
Right.
The drama is usually endless. We just saw last night Toronto forced a Game 7 against Boston. That should be pretty exciting this weekend. We've got Vegas and Dallas, Game 6 tonight. If Vegas can force Game 7, that'll be insanely exciting. It's just endless, the amount of, theater you can have when it comes to the NHL. It's more so than other sports, I think. A lot of years with, the NBA and other sports, you kind of know, these couple teams are the teams that are going to be right there at the end to potentially win the Stanley Cup. But I feel like with the NHL, it's more wide open, especially this year on a year-in and year-out basis. You just never know what you're going to get. There's so many great teams, and I think you're going to love the sport.
I believe everything you say. I've had multiple people say all those things to me over the years, including people I've worked with here who are huge hockey fans who can't believe I'm not more into hockey, but it's not the job. And the job requires watching a lot of sports. So question one for you. Obviously, Ryan Smith, it's a weird deal, right? He bought the Coyotes, but he didn't buy the Coyotes. It's officially a new team. Right. The team was officially sold to the league and then sold to him. But he did get the hockey side of the operations, not the business side. So he does get the GM, Bill Armstrong, and the head coach, Andre Tourny. How respected are they? What do people think of them around the league? Because obviously, if they'd won a lot, then everybody would think they're awesome. This team's missed the playoffs 11 times in 12 years. These guys weren't here for all of that, so that's not on them. And when they have been there, they kind of had their hands tied because the previous owner didn't have the money and didn't have the arena, and they couldn't do everything. So what does the league think of these two guys? Because it looks like they're going to be running the show here for a while.
I think with both Armstrong and Tourny, you're getting, two guys that hadn't really had a chance to do it before. Tourny was, he's the coach in the Quebec Major Junior League, the OHL at the junior level. Never really got a chance to, be an NHL head coach, and this is his first go-around with that. And, so far, each of the 3 seasons, this team has improved. Went up 8 wins from last season to this season, which is pretty impressive considering, a couple years ago, this was a team that only won 25 games. So he's definitely gaining that respect in terms of how he's viewed around the league and has proven that he can be a great coach. The Coyotes last year weren't exactly, they weren't in playoff contention per se, but they weren't as far out as they normally are. And, this is a roster that has a ton of young talent. Clayton Keller, Matthias Michelli. There's a lot of guys that Utah fans are going to come to know and, come to love when this team, starts playing next year.
I can dive into some of the simple stats and see some of the problems and see why they're missing the playoffs. And one of them is they allowed 274 goals, and that's tied for 24th in the 32-team league. Well, that's not good. How quickly can whatever we're going to call this team upgrade their defense?
The one drawback I would say with, kind of free agency this summer, which, tends to be a very active time for many teams, The only issue for Utah is kind of going to be that there's not a ton of marquee defensemen that are going to be available. Some of the top options are going to be Brandon Montour from the Panthers and Brett Pesce from the Hurricanes. But those are guys on teams that are, still in the playoffs contending for a Stanley Cup. So potentially those players get re-signed, which, obviously that wouldn't be a good thing if those are guys that, this team is trying to look at. Up and down, there isn't a ton of depth. They did get a nice season from Sean Durzi in his third year, first two coming with the Kings. When he came over, had a career best 41 points, which is, pretty exceptional. There is room for growth still with him, obviously, being only 25 years old. They do have a couple guys in the pipeline. Dmitry Samashov was the number 6 pick last year as a Russian kid playing over in the KHL, so probably won't see him the next, at least probably until 25, 26, I would say at the earliest. But a fantastic skater and puck mover that really could help this team down the road. So, I don't think it's something that's done through free agency, at least this year, for this team. But I still think the talent is there in the system down the road.
The coach, Andre Tourny, says the 14-game losing streak that they had last 3 games in January and every single game they played in February, he said that was a result of the rumors breaking about Utah. And now they earned 77 points in 82 games, so really they got those 77 points in 68 games. If they were just averaging a point a game instead of having that 14-game losing streak, that alone next year, mathematically, you could see where that would put them on at least the edge of the playoff race. With those rumors put to bed, and with the internal improvement you're talking about with young guys getting better, is it realistic to think that they should be a playoff team next year? Should they be competing for a playoff? Where would you set the goals for them?
I think contending at least for a wild card spot is within the realm of possibilities. I mean, like you said, when these rumors kind of came out, you got to remember at the end of the day, like I get, these are professional athletes, but at the end of the day, they're human beings. They, don't know what the future holds, where they're going to be living, everything like that. So without that, and, the last couple of years they were playing in a 5,000-seat college arena at Arizona State. Like, it wasn't exactly an ideal situation for guys that have been on the team the last few years. So I think with, the depth that they have, the talent that they have, and, a lot of these guys are younger players that are going to continue to improve. I think being in the playoff conversation, I don't think it's crazy. If, this was a traditional situation, like they weren't dealing with those rumors, would they have made the playoffs? I mean, maybe not, but I think they would have been right there, or at least, within, 4 or 5 points of a wild card spot maybe. And, who knows, maybe it turns out differently. But I think having that more stable environment next season should have them within contention at the very least for a wild card spot.
Chris Bengel joining us. He's an NHL writer for CBS Sports. You mentioned the chaotic nature of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Maple Leafs and then the Coyotes, whatever they'll be called here, have the 2 longest Stanley Cup final droughts. They have not been to the Cup final in the longest time. It's 55 years for the Maple Leafs now since they were in the final. And Arizona came in 1979-80, actually played in Canada before they moved to Arizona. So they have never made it in 44 seasons. Now they'll move to Utah. They'll have their third identity. It'll be their 45th season. They've never been to a Stanley Cup final. What has gone wrong that those clubs have that kind of drought where everybody else at some point figures it out and you're the two that haven't?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about, first off, a team like the Maple Leafs who, are in the playoffs this year, still fighting for their playoff lives, there's so much storied tradition with a team like that there's a lot of pressure for them to perform. I mean, before last season, they hadn't won a playoff series in, 9-10 years, I believe it was. There are those huge expectations, and when, it's kind of a lot of times make a deep Stanley Cup run or bust, with a fan base like that. So I think on that aspect of it, there was a lot of pressure. But as far as the Coyotes go, they have been to the conference final once in, their entire history since they were in Arizona. Early in early in that tenure, they had guys like Jeremy Roenick, Keith Tkachuk, obviously Shane Doan, who, a little more recent, but the talent has always been there, but they just, for whatever reason, weren't able to put it together. But I think, now kind of having a fresh start certainly is going to be a good thing for them. All these players, like we said, put all those rumors to bed. They know what's happening. They or be more comfortable in a new spot. And I think it seems like the fan base is already, based on the event that they had last week, kind of rabid for this team. And as we've seen with, Vegas and Seattle in recent years, while it's a little bit different of a scenario, it's still a market that hadn't had, an NHL team before. And I think, that's going to be great for this team. And, maybe they can feed off that kind of like Vegas did back in their first year.
The Rangers had the best record in the league. They haven't won the Cup since Messier did it, right, 30 years ago, and that was the first time in 50 years. Now, you've already talked about the chaotic nature. Is New York going to get it done? Is there somebody else you like? How do you handicap the playoffs here?
So, unfortunately, last year, New York burnt me bad. I was, sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit. They went out and got Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko at the trade deadline, and, kind of thought that would put them over the top, but they fell in the opening round. And, obviously, regular season-wise, the Rangers were ridiculous this year. President's Trophy, best record in the entire league. They're extremely loaded up and down their roster. Supreme goaltending, Igor Shesterkin, solid blue line, the forward depth. Artemi Panarin had a career year, playing out of his mind. But if I'm handicapping it, there's definitely a few teams I think I like more than the Rangers. Personally, I have the Hurricanes winning it all, which is going to be very interesting considering those two are going to start their series this weekend. That's going to be a lot of fun. The Hurricanes added Jake Gensel from the Pittsburgh Penguins at the trade deadline. He's been phenomenal since he came over. This is a team that likes to skate the puck in. They don't, aren't kind of a dump and chase team that relies on their forecheck. So having that along with supreme goaltending from Frederik Andersen, I think they're kind of my team to beat. I just think they're, about as loaded as it comes. And then I'm also got my eye on the Stars Golden Knights series tonight. Whoever comes out of that series also, I think, has the potential to win it all. Stars have 8 guys that scored 20 goals this year. Vegas is loaded at the center position with adding Tomas Hertl at the trade deadline. And, for the first time in the series last game, a home team actually won. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens again tonight with the game being in Vegas. But I think, the Rangers are not my pick as it stands right now, but I think that's because this playoff field is so deep this year. I think there's several teams that could definitely win it.
7 Canadian teams in the league out of 32, and no Canadian team has won it since Montreal in '93. It seems like somebody brings that stretch up. Are there can anybody in Canada realistically think they're going to compete year after year, or are they at a huge disadvantage financially, and that's why half the Canadian teams don't even seem to make the playoffs?
I think it seems like there's a very big talent gap. Like you've got, especially this year, I think it was more evident. You obviously got Toronto, who, their fan base, their franchise, always thinks that they have the talent to compete, which, obviously when you're a storied franchise like that, you kind of have to think that way. Winnipeg, I think maybe for the first time since they relocated back, I think this year were, kind of looked at as they could be a juggernaut. They added Tyler Toffoli at the trade deadline to provide some scoring, but were absolutely steamrolled by Colorado in the first round, lost in 5 games. But then, you look on the bottom scale of it, you've got Calgary Flames struggled this year, have been, not great since Johnny Gaudreau left. You also got, I think the Canadians are slowly but surely making their way back, but, they need some help in a lot of areas, have a few young guys they can build around. But I really just think that, when it comes to the Canadian teams, like Toronto just, that's a team that I feel like when they're good, like hockey fans or even maybe not hockey fans will take notice of that because that's such a marquee franchise, kind of like, I don't want to equate them to like the Cowboys in football, but like it's, a storied franchise like that has, that kind of allure when it comes to, Toronto's in a Game 7, maybe people are going to watch. So, it'll be interesting to see if they can get it done this time around and get to the next round.
All right, well, I feel a little smarter. It's going to take a lot of this. I'm a slow learner and all that, Chris, but I feel a little smarter now. Thanks for a solid 20 minutes of hockey talk.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Chris Bengel, NHL writer for CBS Sports, joining us right here on The Zone. Your feedback next. Stay with us.
And now, enough of us. It's time to hear from you. From all your texts, tweets, and posts. This is the best feedback of the day.
Ooh, I was there. It's the best game of my life.
With DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Join Hans and Scotty Monday from noon to 3. They're broadcasting live from Minky Couture in Layton. Make Mother's Day easy and get the best gift ever, a blanket from Minky Couture. Mom will love it. Shop online at minkycouture.com or at any Minky store. Time for your feedback. Before we get to that, Melinda Adams says, I want to thank everyone for their kind words and support. I am humbled. Do you know who Melinda Adams is? You didn't completely see her. You saw part of her. That's the ESPN producer who Patrick Beverley was trying to humiliate at the end of a very bad day at the office for Patrick Beverley. If you don't subscribe to my podcast, get that mic out of my face. Lower that mic. And she tried to be more subtle and move away. And he just, if you don't subscribe to my podcast, we can't interview you unless we pay you.
Yeah, he just told her to get out of the circle. That's embarrassing.
No.
Bad look.
It was a total bad look, and she says Patrick Beverley just called me and apologized. I appreciate it and accept it. The Bucks also reached out to apologize. I've been in news for over 40 years, and kindness and grace always win. Now, Patrick Beverley has to reach out and apologize to the two Pacer fans that he threw the ball at. I don't know what he heard. I don't know what was said. Possibly he was provoked. Maybe it just came out of the blue. I don't know that. But the person he hit, actually the two people he hit, the first time he threw the ball, it looked like he hit a woman in the face, and it looked like her head slammed into somebody else's head. So the first ball looked like it hurt two people. They weren't even looking at him. I would be stunned if they did anything that deserved to be in the middle of anything.
Maybe he just has bad aim.
So a guy got the ball as it caromed back, and he tossed it lightly and gently towards Beverley. It was no attempt at retribution, just basically giving them the ball back. And this video's out there. You can see it for yourself. And Beverley takes it and just throws it as hard as he can. We used to play a game when I was a kid called Burnout. You threw the ball as hard as you could, and the other kid had to catch it, and then he threw it as hard. Whoever dropped it lost. And you just wind up and just throw it as hard as you could from like 15, 20 feet away. That's what he did. And that one definitely hurt somebody. And then his teammates intervened. It looked way across the line. And then he went in the locker room and did this. I don't know if it's because they were losing the game. I don't know if he thought he heard something. I don't know if it's because that was the last game of his NBA career because he's just about done and they got eliminated. So maybe that was literally the last game of his career. But it was all just way over the line. So one apology down from Patrick Beverley. I expect more coming. All right, your feedback from today's show. With Keba Keita in the transfer portal, what is next and where does Utah basketball go from here? Jimmy sends me the classic gif. Not great, Bob. Can't argue with that. Not great. Talent leaving the program. Not great, Bob. Tom Ute sends the scene from the Titanic where the model Titanic is sinking into the bathtub and is later edited in the movie. Yeah. C. Perkins says college basketball sucks when your team sucks. It's the way a lot of sports work. These sports aren't nearly as much fun when your team isn't winning. Oh, Lenny, who cares? College basketball sucks. It's a football state, and that's all that matters to me. That's the attitude that could get the program down and keep it down right there. Because NIL matters, and if they don't have the NIL, they can't turn it around. If they have the NIL, then I think turning it around ought to be fairly straightforward. I think if he has the NIL, Craig can win. And I don't know the exact NIL numbers. I'm going on the assumption that I saw him coach a Utah State team that had 2 NBA guys, one he inherited, one he recruited, and they were good. And they won a lot of big games. So I think if he has good players, he can win. Now, can he get enough good players? I don't think this last team defended well enough. That was its downfall and why they lost on the road and why they ended up in the NIT instead of the NCAA. But his Aggie teams did defend well enough. Something clearly went wrong last year. Now he's got guys leading the program, but I think they'll need more NIL. But if the Ute fans all say, all I care about is the football team, then Hoops doesn't get NIL money and they don't come back. You got to have the cash. We're out of time. Jake and Ben are next. Have a good weekend.